Hello, I'm Rowan Davis, and in this video I will be talking through the character rig that I have created for this project. The first stage was creating a bone system that matched the mesh correctly to ensure that the skinning stage goes as smoothly as possible. In doing this, it is important to create the bones in correct viewports. For example, the spine and legs must be created in the left viewport and the arms in the top viewport to ensure that the bones are oriented correctly and will bend correctly for the limbs that they support. Several systems were used in the creation of the rig. Firstly, for the feet, the reverse foot rig was used. This is a combination of two separate bone hierarchies, one for the foot and one for the leg. This allows the movement of the foot, such as rolling along the toes, or rolling along the heel, or even tapping the toes, to be controlled with just a few controllers rather than cluttering the viewport. This also means that the leg can be bent and controlled by the position of the foot. This is done through an IK solver connected from the thigh to the leg nub. Further control for the foot is given by use of a swivel angle control connected to the knee. This gives the animator complete control of the leg through minimal controllers. This swivel angle controller is connected to the controller that moves the foot. Whilst this does present a few issues with rotation of the foot and bending of the leg, it also prevents problems with the leg flipping when moved. For example, if I unlink this controller from the base of the foot and then move the foot pad, you can see that the knee flips round as the foot is moved. Another system that was used in the creation of the rig was a blending system for the arms. This meant creating 3 sets of arm bones for the character. One set of bones used inverse kinematic controls. This meant a movable controller at the wrist which would control the rest of the arm, and again a swivel control at the elbow. Another set used forwards kinematic controls. This means that the animator can separately move the shoulder, elbow, and the wrist to adjust the position of the arm. A blending system was used so that a middle set of bones for the actual character skin could then be blended between the two control methods, either inverse kinematics or forwards kinematics. The blending system allows for a choice between the two sets of controls. The trigger to switch between the controls is attached as an instance controller to each of the FK and IK controllers. This means that the animator can easily switch between the two blending modes, no matter which set of controls they have selected. Attaching these controls to an attribute holder also avoids cluttering the viewport with unnecessary sliders and spinners, which may not display correctly in other 3D packages. A stretching spline system was used for the spine. This uses a series of point helpers and animation constraints to individually alter the size and position of each of the bones of the spine depending on the position of the bones surrounding it. This setup uses 3 main controllers, as well as one central overriding controller to give the animator full control of the spine. This means that they can alter the spine in a completely fluid way, depending on how they wish the mesh to animate. Used correctly, the stretching spline method offers a completely smooth blend and stretch between the spinal bones to offer a smooth spinal animation for the mesh. It does, however, give the animator the ability to completely stretch and distort the mesh should they so wish. For the hands of the character rig, a system of wire parameters was used. This meant attaching an attribute holder to a controller linked to the bones of the hands. Through a series of sliders and spinners, the movements of the fingers and thumb can be individually altered. This gives the animator a decent amount of control for the hands. Each bone for the fingers is linked to the bone before it, so this does mean that the fingers must be either completely curled or completely straight. Whilst this is slightly limiting, it avoids cluttering the viewport with too many controllers for the hands. Several steps were taken to try and prevent the animator from being able to completely break the rig. The first of these was locking out any scaling of the bones and controllers. This was done because scaling of any of the bones can lead to unwanted squashing and distortion of the bones, destroying the rig. As well as scaling controls, the movement and rotation controls were locked out of certain controllers on a specific basis. For example, the elbow controls can only be rotated in the local Z axis. To prevent further breaking of the mesh, a stretching bone system was used for the legs. This automatically stretches the bones of the leg depending on the position of the foot nub through use of a small amount of max script applied to the bones. While this isn't practical for use for stretching the mesh, it does prevent the mesh from breaking during animating by accidentally pulling away the foot controller. Finally, to try and make the rig clear and easy to use, a simple colour coordination system was used for the bones and controllers. Red for the torso, green for the right side limbs, blue for the left side limbs, and light blue for the head. The various parts of the rig were also organised into layers, allowing certain parts to be hidden from view. For example, the dummies or helpers for the stretching spine or bone systems which should not be altered, or the FK and IK bones, leaving just the controllers to move the arms. The final stage of creating the rig was skinning it to the mesh itself. This was done through use of paint weights, and also through use of the weight tool. This meant that the mesh could be skinned to the rig on a vertex by vertex level, painting out weights where they're not needed, and painting in where more strength is needed. Certain parts of the mesh presented difficulty when skinning, the shoulders specifically because they merge into the chest and neck of the character, making the vertices hard to paint in so that they blend smoothly. The feet of the mesh were also interesting to skin, as what you would consider the main foot bone has no vertex weights. Instead, the weighting is given to the toe roll and heel roll bones, allowing the mesh to follow this. Throughout the skinning process of the rig, a test animation was used to ensure that the skinning was working correctly. While I was skinning the rig, I was scrubbing the timeline to make sure that the mesh was distorting correctly for the bones that the character was using. When I was happy enough with how the character had been skinned, I created a simple walk cycle animation to test the movements of the character. This revealed several more problems in the character skinning, which I then went back and changed. Overall, I'm fairly happy with the character rig. I would, however, have liked to included more automation, such as having the character curl into a ball or stand up straight with the use of a single controller. I would also have liked to include a system whereby the forwards kinematic controls can be snapped to the inverse kinematic controls of the arm, giving the animator much more fluid and greater control of the arms of the character rig. Ultimately, the character rig is fairly effective in its purpose, though it may benefit from some extra controllers, such as the ability to move the character more easily around the scene, rather than animating on the spot. This must currently be done by selection of the waist, wrist, and feet controllers, as these control the IK goals of the mesh, and moving these together as a whole. Otherwise, the goals are left behind and the mesh distorts. The potential for facial animation could also have been explored to a certain degree. Although the character doesn't have many facial features, perhaps stretching of the jaw or chin to indicate movement could have been used. This concludes the demonstration of my character rig. Thank you for your time.